Hello, I'm Dylan,
And I'm Keon.
and this is Triple Play, that podcast where we have a seemingly limitless amount of money even when we're allegedly bankrupt, because this week we watched the Dark Knight trilogy.
Written by Christopher Nolan, David S. Goyer, Jonathan Nolan, and that's it.
Directed by Christopher Nolan.
And released in 2005, 2008, and 2012.
Yeah, the greatest superhero trilogy of all time, allegedly.
Yeah, some people definitely still think that.
Well, I mean, of all the ones we've watched for this show, I liked this one more. Spider-Man's a close second.
For me, the second, I know it's not really a trilogy, but we posited it as one. Second X-Men trilogy is probably a second to me, or is tied with this to me, I guess.
Yeah, that one was pretty good, as well. I guess. Did we do Iron Man on the? We did the Iron Man on this show.
We did
That
Iron
one,
Man.
it was all right, I suppose. It wasn't great. It was kind of just eh.
It also had like a kind of bad legacy, but I guess you can't really rope that in if you're just judging the movie itself. So
Yeah, that's true. We shouldn't judge movies based on the impact they had on society. I can't even tell if I'm being sarcastic or not. I just genuinely can't. I genuinely don't know. I before we started this for the podcast, I had only seen The Dark Knight and only on like cable television, so it was interrupted by ads. So I genuinely didn't remember like a substantial amount of the movie, except for the "hit me, hit me, hit me, come on, hit me" scene.
yeah,
That's the only thing I remembered for the first from my first watch through.
that is one of the most iconic scenes from the movie. I think the second Dark Knight is filled with iconic scenes. Actually, I had that's the only one that I had watched originally as well. I watched it on DVD in 2008, which I guess just speaks to how big of a movie The Dark Knight really was. I think I watched it at like I don't have the DVD. It wasn't mine. I watched it. I want to say with my cousin or something like on DVD that year. So I watched that one when it was like a big deal. The other two I didn't, but yeah.
Yeah, and we were just talking about this before the podcast that even though Dark Knight Rises made more money than Dark Knight, that like my remembrance of the cultural phenomenon surrounding these movies was that like no one really cared about Batman Begins or Dark Knight Rises, but Dark Knight was like the big thing in culture for like years.
Yeah, it was a big deal for all of 2008, I remember. And I mean, we were in that age group that like was at least to some extent being targeted, so
I mean, we were definitely in the age group that Nolan was targeting with the Batman Begins because, as I guess a great segue is that when he set out to make that movie, he said that he basically just made the movie he wanted to see when he was a teenager.
yeah, surprisingly enough, for the first one at least, like, I didn't think there was much interesting behind the scenes, or not much controversial, I guess. I don't know why I went into these thinking like there was going to be some big stuff. There was for The Dark Knight, but not for the first one.
Well, so Batman Begins was the one that really had to establish the visual look of this franchise moving forward. And so before watching Batman Begins, I've been watching all the Batman movies with my family. We watched all the Marvel movies. Now we're watching all the Batman movies, mainly because my dad wants to know like what's the big deal with all these big superhero movies.
Nothing.
Because he had seen the Tim Burton Batman movies back in the day when they came out in theaters. So he was like, what is this? Anyway, so I watched the Tim Burton Batman movies. I watched the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, and then I watched these. And maybe that's why I think these are maybe pretty good because the Joel Schumacher Batman movies are like they're pretty bad. Like not even just from like a Batman movie standpoint, like from a movie making standpoint, there are like massive sins committed by both of the Joel Schumacher movies. But after Batman and Robin, Warner Brothers was like, well, because that one wasn't very successful, they were like, well, what do we do now? Do we want to make a fifth Batman movie? Do we want to reboot the franchise? Because ostensibly the Joel Schumacher movies are the same continuity as the Tim Burton ones, but I don't think that's true after watching them, that they are. And basically then that movie languished in development hell for years. And a whole bunch of people tried to reboot Batman. Joss Whedon among them. And then eventually Christopher Nolan was an indie movie maker at the time, and Warner Brothers was like, all right, you made Memento, which is apparently really good. I haven't watched it yet. We'll give you the keys to Batman, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Nolan and the rest of the team like actually took the project really seriously. I mean, they did their homework, they read comics, but they I think also knew right off the bat that 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 they were going to go for something more grounded.
Yeah, because I actually think that, say what you will about movies now being, quote, dark and gritty and grounded, potentially as a result of the Batman Begins Dark Knight trilogy. I think at the time it was a really smart move, especially because, the culture of superhero movies at the time, 2005, when Batman Begins came out, was, the darkest you really got was X-Men. And I remember us talking about those were pretty, like, they're not like fun and campy really in the way that the Marvel movies are. But Batman specifically had existed in this realm where, like, the last Batman movie people had seen was Batman and Robin, and that movie is just like, think of the campiest thing you can think of and then multiply it by 10. That's Batman and Robin. So, like, the Batman franchise at that point going into the movies was at a point where, like, you couldn't go that direction anymore. Like, you could not, literally could not make it
Yeah,
campier.
that's the thing. Like, and I kind of knew this before looking stuff up for this movie because I also kind of looked up other Batman things, but like, but I didn't really know. I had no idea to the extent that like Batman really was like this sort of humorous, campy thing. Like, and that's how people knew Batman. But that's so weird to me because like Batman is the one superhero who's like you can really capitalize on the edginess.
Yeah, because he is like, it's a completely insane story. And it's weird too, because the Tim Burton movies, in my opinion, also really play into the like darkness and the grittiness and the edginess because it's Tim Burton. But people, I guess, had that perception, and I don't know how true this is, but I think people had that perception because of the Joel Schumacher movies, but also the
Yeah.
Adam West
Yep.
TV show. And those two were like, haha, Batman is just a campy superhero who like he dresses as a bat, like haha, that's so funny, right? Like haha.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, this like trilogy also came out at the right time for that too, because like I don't know if you remember, but like the mid 2000s were like the edgiest time in living memory. Like, like dark and edgy was that was the period for it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people point to these movies as being the reason why like superhero movies became so quote unquote grounded moving forward. But I don't really think you can blame these movies because I think going back to like the visual style and the thematic style, these movies were born of a necessity to go that direction because it needed to be different than what Batman had been before. So I don't think they're necessarily at fault for like every superhero movie being the same now. I think that's more indicative of like the culture of Hollywood than it is to like point fingers at The Dark Knight and be like, you're the reason this all sucks.
I also think superhero movies are nowadays are just way more similar to Iron Man than anything we see in this trilogy.
Yeah, which is really interesting because John Favreau basically mentioned Batman Begins as being part of the reason why Iron Man is the way Iron Man is. Iron Man came out the same year as The Dark Knight.
Yeah, and it even has, most likely coincidentally, a very similar scene to The Dark Knight, the I am Iron Man thing at the end, versus the press
Yeah.
conference in the middle of The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting there.
But yeah, like you said, they took the job pretty seriously and read a lot of comics, none of which I've read, but that might be why this movie's darker, is because, again, Nolan was like, I want to make the Batman movie I wanted to see when I was a teenager. So some of the comics he listed as inspiration were, got a list: The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and The Man Who Falls. Apparently, Blade Runner is Christopher Nolan's favorite movie, so he took that as inspiration too for this
Yeah,
trilogy.
that's probably one of the best things about this trilogy, in my opinion. And that this doesn't just apply to the first; it's really all of them. But like, you get this sort of like, it's almost like Gotham is almost this like cyberpunk-ish neo noir thing, like with the monorails and stuff like that. And they said they took inspiration from multiple real world cities, mostly New York. I mean, it looks most like New York, I think. Chicago.
Chicago, because they filmed it in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, um, Chicago as well.
Yeah, it touches back to that, like, the sort of gothic or older style too, with the architecture based, like, because it's based on these cities that were established before, before modern cities existed. So, like, a city like New York wasn't built for like modern transportation or cars or anything like that, right? That was added on after, which is
Hmm.
why you get what New York is today and kind of why it looks like it looks, versus a city like LA, which was came to be what it was in the 20th century. It kind of evolved with transportation and technology and all that. So, like, you get that sort of gothic look with Gotham, as you should, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's very much comic inspired. In the comics, um, the DC comics, I guess, are different from the Marvel comics in that they, at least in like the 60s, 70s, took place in these fictional cities, whereas Marvel was like, this is LA. In DC, it was, this is Gotham and this is Metropolis. Gotham was always supposed to be a very like Chicago esque clash of architecture, Art Deco, mafia controlled city, and Metropolis was always supposed to be like very New York, LA style, modern vision of the future. Um, so that is the one thing that I think is universally great about all the three of these movies is the like production design, art design across all of them is just great. Like the care and attention they put into it, which is partially because Christopher Nolan apparently is really heavy into using practical effects, model work over digital effects. So much so that his production designer Nathan Crowley, who worked with him in all these movies, basically like set up shop in Nolan's garage and just spent like days building models of cars and the city
Yep.
to get
Mm-hmm.
the visuals, which I love. I mean, I love the look of Gotham and Batman in these movies. Like after, especially watching the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher movies, where Gotham just kind of exists as a place the movie takes place in, as compared to, I would argue that these movies, it kind of feels like Gotham almost as a character. It's got like a life to it almost, especially in the first one where we see like the almost the like underground Gotham and the above ground Gotham, with the all the criminals live in the under the monorail and everybody else lives above it.
Yeah, these movies definitely, like, at least, well, I'm kind of blanking on what I just wanted to say, but, like, they definitely, like, at least try to, if even if it's not successful, which maybe it is, maybe it's not, try to, like, invest you in the fate of Gotham. Or they're not more, but they are as about, like, what happens to Gotham as they are what happens to the characters type thing.
Yeah, and the first one I think does this really, really subtly and really well because the beginning of the movie, we see Batman's origin, we see them go to the opera, and then we see Batman's parents get killed. An explicit change from the comics, by the way, where apparently they go to see a Zorro movie, but Nolan was like, nah, we're not doing that. He's going to go see an opera. But in that first scene, they ride the not the subway, the monorail, and they mentioned that Thomas Wayne paid for it, and it's all nice and clean. The monorail, it's like fully stocked. There's passengers on it, and the next time we see the monorail in the movie, when Bruce Wayne returns to Gotham as an older man, it's dirty. There's no one riding the monorail. It's covered in graffiti,
Mm-hmm.
just showing the decay of Gotham, like in a very subtle but realistic way. Um,
Yeah.
the most interesting thing I found out about the first one, I guess maybe this is the physicist in me talking, was the Tumbler, the Batmobile, which they designed to look like what it is in the movie, which is a kind of military experimental car. But apparently they built an actual tumbler, six of them, in fact, and they didn't build them on any, like, normally when you build a movie car, or previously when they built the Batmobile, they built the shell on top of the body of another car. They built the tumbler completely from scratch because they didn't want it to have a front axle, which basically connects the two front wheels. They wanted the two wheels to move independently. Apparently, allegedly, this was thought to be impossible to do, to have the two front wheels of a car move independently like that and still support the weight of the car. But they did it. Apparently, it was a major engineering coup that they were able to build it and pull it off.
Yeah, nice.
Or actually, they built 8. I have a note here that says they built 8, one of which was electric. But I don't remember the reason why it was electric.
Yeah, why not? You know. Why not just strap an engine to like a chair, like they did in the pod races in Star Wars?
Yeah, I'm going to strap 2 jet engines to some cables and strap them to my office chair, and then I can go speeding down the freeway.
Or like, like you do in GTA, like ride a bike on the freeway. A bike, like a bicycle, not a motorcycle. Imagine if you were just driving on the freeway and you pass by like 60, you're going 60 and there's some guy just bike. Okay, whatever.
The very first speeding ticket that was ever given was given to a guy who was driving 8 miles an hour, blistering speed of 8 miles an hour, 4 times the legal speed limit, and he was chased for 5 miles by policemen on bicycles.
Wow. Speaking of freeways, though, one of the inspirations they took for Gotham was Tokyo, and that's how they kind of they incorporated its sort of ramps and twisting and winding roads into Gotham, which you kind of see with the monorail, and you just kind of see it in like the aerial shots that you see of Gotham.
Mm-hmm. Meet the new Batman. Bigger, blacker, and ready for action. I forgot about that. It was one of the articles I was looking at.
I didn't know that was a meme or a thing.
Just the fact that they refer to him as blacker. Like, what?
Yeah.
What? Anyway.
So, as far as casting went, apparently the guy who plays the Scarecrow,
Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, they were originally thinking of casting him as Batman. Out of all the, people who auditioned, he was a very close second, I think, to Christian Bale.
Yeah, see that, like, I didn't actually see that when I was looking up, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that kind of ties into something I wanted to talk about, like why I think the first movie just doesn't really, like, work as well as I think it should.
Because the Scarecrow is, like, kind of lame.
Yeah, because...
Is that what you're going to say?
Kind of, because the Scarecrow is a character who... Well, let me back up a little bit. If you don't know, most of Batman's villains are, like, dark reflections of some aspect of the Batman persona. So the Joker, which is... And why I think the Dark Knight works so well is because the Joker is the dark reflection of Batman's search for order. So the Joker is chaos. Two-Face is a reflection of the dual identity of Batman and Bruce Wayne. The Riddler is a dark reflection of Batman's intelligence. The Penguin is a reflection of Batman's privileged upbringing as a high-class socialite. The Scarecrow is the reflection of how the Batman strikes fear into, it sounds cheesy, but strikes fear into the criminals in Gotham. And so what I really was hoping the first movie was going to do when I found out that it was about the Scarecrow was really kind of dive into that, how the Scarecrow is someone who is like, he's just trying to understand fear, but he's not really all that different from Batman if you think about it, because Batman's also trying to strike fear into people. And they kind of touch on that, but like the Scarecrow is so underutilized as a character in Batman Begins that it never really like lands.
No, and they kind of... even whether intentional or not, the second and third one even almost serve as like a commentary on that, where like he appears in all 3 of these, but in 2 and 3 he's just like this guy who's kind of lame and like especially in 2 where it's like it opens with him and you're like, oh no, it's the Scarecrow, but then he gets like shut down immediately.
Yeah, because there's a lot of potential for a lot of interesting things to be done with the Scarecrow because fear is a primal human emotion, and they could have even honestly made him the main villain of the third one again when they were talking about how Batman like needed to regain his fear of death. Fear is a major theme in Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises, and Scarecrow as a character is never used as a lens through which we could analyze those themes, and that's kind of why I think those two movies are lesser than The Dark Knight, because I think The Dark Knight is very successful in like examining this reflection aspect between the Joker and Batman, whereas the other two don't really ever quite get there.
Yeah.
Which I'll talk about more when we get to Dark Knight Rises, because woo boy, do I have some thoughts about that one. Liam Neeson plays
Ra's
Ra's
al
al
Ghul,
Ghul,
right?
which is I was just surprised they pronounced it that way in the movie because in the Batman Arkham Asylum video games they pronounce it Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, I thought it was like the way I saw it was like written was like a possessive, like Raz, R-A
Yeah,
apostrophe
it's R
S.
A apostrophe S,
Yeah.
but it's I don't think it's possessive. I think it's supposed to be like a Middle Eastern slash Arabian type name or Arabic.
Yeah, it is Arabic, al Ghul, which is just, as you might guess, the ghoul.
Oh, Wikipedia has a pronunciation guide that says either Resh or Raz or both
Yeah,
pronunciations.
take your pick.
Raz comes from its current spelling, but the creators of the character originally spelled and pronounced it R-E apostrophe S-H, Resh. In
Yeah.
rough translation, the chief or head demon.
Anyway, what were you gonna say about him before we
Oh,
go
I
on?
just said Liam Neeson plays Ra's al Ghul.
Oh yeah, so
Just,
touching back,
I think, yeah.
touching back to our Taken episode, we were like, yeah, we're not really sure what this guy's been in. Yeah, he was in Batman, Star Wars, and
Yeah, I can't believe we did that in that episode. I don't know what he was in. It's like freaking Star Wars. It's like sitting over in the corner staring at us.
yeah.
Jeez.
He is, though, the first, I think, indication that I think, as with most Batman things, whether it's the comics or the animated shows or these movies as well, like the villains are probably some of the best that you see in superheroes. Obviously, I'm not the biggest superhero guy, but like, yeah, I mean, Batman's villains are, I think, at least typically considered, to be up there. And he's kind of the first
Yeah.
indication of that. There's like all these movies have sort of maybe less so the Dark Knight, but they kind of all have sort of a fake out with the villain, where it's like, and then this first one that it establishes it, where it's like, you think it's the one guy, but it actually turns out to be Liam Neeson's character.
Yeah, the Batman Begins actually has a double fake out because first you think it's going to be Carmen Falcone is going to be the main villain because he's the first one who Batman really like threatens at the beginning of the movie, but then it's like revealed that the Scarecrow slash Dr. Crane is like putting people in Arkham Asylum to run experiments on. So you're like, oh, he's the main villain, but then at the end it's like surprise. Actually, it's not. It's
He,
Ra's
yeah,
al
it's
Ghul.
almost like those two almost serve as like this frame thing, right? Where it's like first you have the fake Ra's al Ghul, and then you have Falcone, who then gets replaced by the Scarecrow. And at the end, you go back to the frame almost, right? Where it's like, no, it wasn't actually him. I'm Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, it's kind of the way they do it though. I really like it because it's almost like a mystery movie. There are a lot of hints throughout the movie that there's someone bigger than the Crane working on it. Falcone mentions that he's working for someone else. When he's talking with Crane, he mentions that Crane's boss won't be happy about certain things. When Crane's goons are dumping the thing into the sewer, you're like, what's going on? In the middle of the movie, an EMP generator thing gets stolen from one of the Wayne ships. Like there are all these just clues that are laid out throughout the movie that I really like.
Yeah. Even still, though, I guess if we're fully diving into the story and such, like I don't know, the first one it just didn't really land with me. It just a lot of the sort of action and plot, I guess you can call it, were just really boring to me. And I think part of that was like this was going to be an origin story, which apparently you probably, I guess, know better than me because I haven't really watched any of the other Batman movies. But apparently, Batman's origins were never explored in a movie before.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the Tim Burton movies, again, the Joel Schumacher ones are supposed to be a continuation, and the Tim Burton ones, Batman, it's just
Mm-hmm.
called Batman. In that movie, Batman is already established. Or he okay. I mean, he's already established, but he's not like not well known. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
he's
Mm-hmm.
established, but you don't really know what he's doing. You just know that he's already Batman.
He's where Christian Bale is, like in the middle of this one, I guess, right?
Yeah,
So
he's what Christian Bale is like in Batman Begins once he's taken down Carmen Falcone. That's
yeah.
kind of where you assume Batman is in Batman,
Mm-hmm.
the first Tim Burton Batman.
Yeah, I mean, this movie it goes for it, and like it does it well. Like it does his origin story well, I guess. But it also like I think a lot of the half bakedness of the Scarecrow that you were talking about before is like is because of that. It's like you really only get into the 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 crime or like the what Batman has to solve like in the middle of the movie. So
Yeah, I was surprised when I was watching it, like how much of the first movie was him in I don't know what country it's supposed to be, where he's training with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Assassins.
yeah, and it's done in a it's done in like a really weird way too, which I guess is down to Christopher Nolan directing it and wanting to just play with time and shit, even when it's not a time travel story. But like, it starts with that with it starts with Bruce Wayne having gone on this journey, and then you get his backstory. Then you go back to the journey, and then he's back in Gotham, and then yeah, it's just it's a little odd. It's I like it though. I guess I mean, despite what I just said, like it's an interesting interplay there. I guess you could say.
I like it. It might be because he was known at the time, because the movie that made him big was Memento, which is famous for being the most convoluted, out of order movie ever made, because it's got two plot threads that are running concurrently, but one is running through the plot of the movie forwards in time, and one is running through the movie backwards in time.
Yeah. Yep. I knew that somehow. I don't know how I knew that.
Never seen it, but it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and then obviously Christopher Nolan would go on to direct, besides the other two Batman movies, Inception, what was no
Tenet,
Tenet, which is new.
Interstellar,
Yeah, Interstellar was the one I was thinking
all
of.
of which involve time or playing around with time in some way.
Right.
I mean, what is it we always say on Doctor Who? Authors have four stories they tell over and over again their whole career.
Yeah. They just repackage it every time. So in a way, that kind of snuck into Batman.
Yeah, a little bit. So going into the second and third movie, David S. Goyer, who co-wrote the first movie, but didn't co-write the second two, but has a story credit, basically wrote two kind of treatments for sequels.
Right.
Basically, just this is what we would do. Here's kind of a plot summary, beat by beat, on what the movie would be. And basically, in those script ideas, the Joker and Two-Face would feature in both movies, but basically Harvey Dent would only get turned into Two-Face like in the Joker's trial, which was going to open the second, or I guess technically third movie. That's when the Joker would disfigure Harvey and he would become Two-Face. Because I think like Harvey's slash Two-Face's comic origin is that he was disfigured by acid thrown on his face by someone on trial. They changed that for the Dark Knight, obviously.
Right. And what they also changed for The Dark Knight, I know there's more to say about the scripts, but something they also, since we're on the topic, they also changed the way the Joker's face was disfigured. because it's typically in most Batman stories, I believe it was that he fell into something toxic and it
Yeah.
messed up his face. But I guess since they kind of roped the Joker and Two Face into the same movie, they just had the Joker's weird looks be makeup, and then like you don't really know what happened to his face. We'll talk about that because I think that's one of the most interesting things in the movie is his two conflicting stories about his backstory. But like,
Yeah, well, that's I think Nolan said this because this is tied into the production of the second movie. Again, they read a lot of comics, and Nolan said that they took a lot of inspiration from the comics for the Joker's origin because there's never really been like a Joker origin story except for the Killing Joke, which comes closest. Which then immediately the next time you see the Joker, like someone asks him if that's his real origin, he says, "Well, maybe, but probably not."
mm-hmm.
And he says something like, "I prefer my past to be multiple choice." And so one of the, every other Batman villain has a really defined backstory, and the Joker doesn't. And I think that's one of his like defining features, especially of the stories that they read to take inspiration for the second movie.
Yeah, Suicide Squad had his backstory being like he fell into acid or something like that.
Greatest
That
movie of
was,
all
I know,
time.
yeah. I'm referencing Suicide. Although, yeah, on second thought, I guess that is just Harley Quinn explaining that story, and that's her version of it too. So you don't even know. I think that's what it was in that movie.
Yeah. I mean, again, the Joker reflecting Batman. Really, the people of Gotham don't know Batman's origin story either. And so the Joker not having one is also like a kind of a nod in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, and I was going to mention this earlier. So Heath Ledger is cast as the Joker, and I think part of the reason why The Dark Knight was in such a big cultural thing was because Heath Ledger dies before the movie comes out. He passes away. So it was like I think kind of partially his last role on film.
It was his second to last. He did. There was something where there was another thing where he appeared posthumously, and it came out after this. I forgot what it was though.
Yeah, I think
I
yeah.
guess we can just look it up right now, which I'll do.
A bunch of other people were apparently considered for the role of the Joker, like Adrian Brody, who we saw in The Predator,
Yeah.
and Paul Bettany, who we saw in Iron Man, who voiced Jarvis, the AI in Tony Stark's suit. They eventually settled on Heath Ledger.
He appeared in something, I don't know what this is. It's called The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, which came out in
I've
2000.
heard of that movie, weirdly.
It looks like a sort of kids fantasy movie. I've never heard of it before, so.
Also, Robin Williams and Steve Carell were both considered for the Joker as well,
God.
or were at least publicly expressed interest.
Yeah, and Heath Ledger, both his death and his performance as the Joker are completely related to how big of a phenomenon The Dark Knight was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, if I remember correctly, it was right after they finished filming that I think he OD'd on sleeping pills or something.
Yeah, I guess I'll just bring up his page right now.
And I think that's why it was also like a big deal because it was like he died of drug overdose, but it wasn't like a typical like Hollywood, type thing. He was just trying to get to sleep, and he.
Yeah, it was an accidental drug overdose.
Yeah.
Gone too soon. He was only 28 too.
Yeah.
Jeez, I didn't realize he was so young. I mean, I knew he was young. I didn't realize he was that young.
Yeah. Or that he was actually Australian. I guess I have his page pulled up. So, but yeah, Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker is what made people more interested in this one than the other two, and I think at least partially what makes this one better.
Yeah, I mean, he wins posthumously. He's one of only two, I believe, people to win posthumous Best Acting Oscars because he wins Best Actor for his portrayal of the Joker. And I think Nolan said something like, when you have an actor as esteemed as Gary Oldman on the set and he's just entranced by someone like young and new, and what they're doing on set with the character, like he was with Heath Ledger, that's how you know you're watching something really special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we mentioned it, but Gary Oldman is in all three of these in a prominent role.
Yeah, as Lieutenant, later Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah, I don't remember. So I've watched. I don't really remember because I was a kid, but like I've watched a fair amount of the Batman the animated series, and Batman Beyond, which was sort of like a follow up to it. And I don't remember that character. I don't know if he was in those, and I'm just not remembering. But yeah, I don't remember.
Probably not Batman
Probably not
Beyond.
Batman Beyond,
So I
right?
get, but I think he is like an established part of Batman
Mm-hmm.
lore. He's in the Tim Burton, Joel Schumacher
Mm-hmm.
ones, not in like a major capacity, but he's in
Right.
them. Um,
Batman Beyond
but I
was
think he is an established part of the
yeah.
lore.
Batman Beyond was like the coolest incarnation of Batman.
There's a rumor going around, and presumably we'll know more about it when this comes out, that like they may or may not be doing some sort of pseudo Batman Beyond esque story with, because they're bringing back Michael Keaton's Batman. Michael Keaton played Batman in the Tim Burton movies.
Yeah, could be interesting. I think Batman Beyond also was one of the ones was prematurely canceled or something like that. I don't really remember, but I think they had another season planned and it just never happened or something. I don't know, but I guess it doesn't matter for what we're talking about here.
I think you're right. So my favorite part of the filming of the second movie was that, so Nathan Crowley designed what they called the Bat Pod, which was his little motorcycle. And that motorcycle that they built was apparently so unstable, so unlike riding a regular motorcycle, that there was only one stuntman on set who actually could balance it and drive it. And Christian Bale tried real hard to convince Nolan to let him get on the bike, and basically everyone in the like production team was like, not happening, Christian, it's like way too dangerous.
Probably for the best. That you're actually bringing up a good point though that I'd never considered, which is that like if you are a stuntman on Batman or on another superhero that's mostly fully cloaked in their costume and maybe with a mask, like yeah, you get to be that character, you know, fully. You get to dress up as Batman, ride the motorcycle, and ride the Batmobile and stuff. Even though the Batmobile
Yeah, you get
interior
to be Batman.
apparently was just a set.
Yeah, I don't think there was actually that much interior space in the
No.
tumbler that they built. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you get to be Batman or Iron Man or whatever it is. Guess that's pretty cool. No one will really know,
Yeah.
I guess. Like, no one will really know, but it'll be cool. Apparently, Christopher Nolan, I guess this ties into something I wanted to talk about with regards to his love of practical effects, which I appreciate as I just think it adds more realism. It looks better on screen. Is that the he basically acceded to doing CG for Two Face's post burned face because he basically said this thing that like we couldn't do it with makeup because makeup adds to the face rather than taking away like you would like what would actually happen if you got burned or like actual burn victims
Mm-hmm.
have experienced. So they used makeup and a bowl cap for his hair, where his hair burned off, and then his actual face is all done in CG, and it looks pretty good in my opinion, especially for 2008. And part of the reason why I think these movies look so good and hold up so well visually is because basically everything is a practical effect. Like I said, they built the tumbler, they built the bat pod, they used models if they needed to film like the tumbler jumping over something or the car doing something. They actually blew everything up. Like so much of these movies is actual practical hands-on in-camera effects, and Nolan even said like he said it in that way, in-camera effects as preferred to post-production effects.
Huh.
So, and there's a story about Dark Knight Rises related to that we're gonna get to that I want to talk about, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Well, I mean, this one, I mean, it came out and it was a massive phenomenon. It did really well commercially and critically, and yeah, I mean,
It made
everyone back
over a
then,
billion dollars.
yeah, it is. This one and the second one, I think, are up there with some of the highest grossing movies ever. I
Yeah,
don't,
Dark Knight Rises is currently, I believe, the seventh highest grossing movie of all time.
and this one's like this one probably is within the top. I don't know, 25 or something.
Yeah,
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 it was a big. It was a big phenomenon too. Like I remember back in 2008, everyone was talking about this. Everyone wanted to see it, from kids to adults. Like, yeah, and it's good. I think it's. I was fully prepared to hate this movie going in, but I didn't. It's good. It's a good movie.
yeah. No, I mean I do think the second one is. I think it's definitely the best of the three, and I definitely think it's probably, now having rewatched it and remembering it more, probably one of my favorite superhero movies, which I don't typically hold those in very high esteem, so that's not like a super high
Yeah,
ranking of it, but
yeah. Anyone who's listened to this podcast or others knows that I hold superhero movies in very low esteem, and I think this is the best one and is like pretty damn good that I've seen at least.
yeah, because it deals with a lot of interesting themes. Nolan is explicitly, when he set out to make it, was like, I want to make it more like a detective movie. I want to lean more into that aspect of the Batman character, because that was something that, when Batman was established, was, he's the world's greatest detective. We don't see that a lot now, but Nolan wanted to lean into that, and I think that grounds the movie more, but also makes the plot a lot tighter.
Yeah, I mean, you also just go right into it too as well, and you kind of get that. You get the like that via Batman being established right at the beginning. Like right off the bat again. Batman is this guy who's he's working with Gordon. He is this guy that people fear, and obviously, because obviously the origin story was in the first one, but you know it's just you go in and you're already established there in that world, I guess.
The first one does kind of like sequel bait you at the end,
Yeah.
when Gordon's like, but what about all the people who are coming out of the woodwork now, like, because you're the Batman? Like, there's some guys robbing banks and he's leaving a calling card, and it's this, and it's just a Joker card, and you're like,
Yeah, and Christian Bale in his Batman voice is like, I'll look into it.
that was a really good impression. I mean, you didn't have all the digital effects, but it was a pretty good impression.
Yeah, I remember it being such a meme that like people would make fun of how he talked as Batman,
Which is funny because, like, George Clooney, Val Kilmer, Michael Keaton, they all did that. Like, in their Batman movies, they all did the, I'm going to talk in a really deep voice now that I'm Batman.
Yeah, like the whole "Where's Rachel" thing. Right. Wow, I even said okay. The whole "Where's Rachel?" like where is she? And like yeah.
And also, that's become one of the most, like, misquoted movie lines, up there with Luke, I am your father, when really the line is,
I am your father.
oh no, I am your father.
It's yeah. If people say I am your father, but it's I am your father.
Yeah. And then this one is like, everybody's like, where's Rachel? But the line in the movie is just, where is she? Where is she? That's it. That's all he said. He doesn't say, where's Rachel?
He does say he's going to find Rachel, and then just disregards what he said. Changes his mind midway there, I guess.
Well, the Joker gives him, like, he swaps the addresses. I mean.
Oh, was that what it was? I didn't even get that.
Oh, you didn't get that? No,
yeah.
the Joker told him that she was at the building he was going to, and that he was at the building that he sent Gordon to. He swapped the addresses on Batman.
Wow, I kind of like my interpretation better, to be honest. Like I thought that was Batman like deciding, between the two of them, and he's like, of course I'm going to Rachel, and then he goes and he changes his mind. He's like, he saves Harvey instead. Wow, I did not know that in either of the times I watched this. Granted, I was like 12 the first time, but
because it's pretty subtle. Like, if you have to like really listen to what the Joker's saying in the scene when he's interrogating, because he only says it once. Mm-hmm. and you have to catch it. And I only caught it on this. I didn't catch it the first time I watched it, but on this one, he definitely swaps the addresses to what, because Batman thinks he's going to get Rachel, and that's kind of like thematically how, you know, it ends up that both him and Rachel choose Harvey over each other, but what actually happened was that Batman's choice was made for him. He didn't get a choice because he chose Rachel,
Yeah, wow.
whereas Rachel chose
That
Harvey.
puts a lot of the rest of the movie and stuff in the third one into perspective. Wow.
Like a better perspective or like a worse
I
perspective?
don't, just a different one. Cause yeah, something I wanted to talk about this was like the like subtle and perhaps not so subtle like homoeroticism that I think it's there, and I was gonna reference this, but like I guess it's not.
I mean, there might be a little bit of it. It's a guy dressed up in a big black leather suit running around at night, uh, with. I mean, he's definitely got eyes on Harvey, but probably not necessarily in that way.
I mean, I don't think like on the level of like the character's intentions and the plot and stuff that there's some sort of implied relationship or anything or interest between Harvey and Batman. I'm just saying that there's like the way it's portrayed is like there's some level of like this is dealing with on some level like a subtext of like homoeroticism. Even with the Batman and the Joker, or Batman. The Batman is a show, is an animated show. Like they have all those. They're like they have the scenes together where it's like we were meant for each other, or like we're inseparable, we type thing. So,
That's definitely something that's pulled straight out of the comics. The Joker being like, you and I were like destined to be together because you can never kill me and I can never kill you because you're just too much fun.
And I mean, the Joker shows up in a female nurse outfit in this movie. I mean, there's definitely something of like of the queer or something like that in this. It's not even too big of a thing, but I think it's there.
Well, if you want the homoerotic subtext in your Batman, you can always watch the Joel Schumacher movies where it's hard to deny.
Right? Yeah, but
Partially because Joel Schumacher is, or was, I should say, he died very recently, gay.
yeah, but just the
I
relationship.
put that in there on purpose. Sorry, I should mention that he put it in there on purpose because he wanted there to be some sort of acceptance of that in culture, and that he wanted kids to be able to look at it, kids who were gay to look at it and feel like there was an icon for them. Let me just wanted to explain that. Didn't want to make it sound like Joel Schumacher could only make gay things because he was gay. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, I mean, even like just the relationship between Batman and Joker, I think is and Two-Face is part of this as well. Is pretty interesting in these movies. The second one more so than the third one. Both of them kind of deal with Batman and his nature is like this masked vigilante, I guess, and like they make very clear that they want you to think about how Batman wears a mask and the Joker doesn't, like, because the Joker puts his face out, he's wearing the makeup and stuff, but like, and that's the thing though that this movie I think does or touches on, is that like, yeah, in this one the Joker is wearing makeup. That's not his actual face. He is sort of, despite what the characters say, like he is wearing these multiple masks. One is like the literal makeup, and I think the second one is like how like nobody knows who this guy is, right? Like he ostensibly puts his face out there and ostensibly wants the Batman to do the same thing. But when people ask him how he got the scars, or rather when he forces that story on people, like it's a different story every time. Like you don't know who this guy is, you don't know his origin, and you don't know how his face came to be how it is.
Yep.
That's not something I picked up on in the first watching of it. Again,
well,
granted,
you
I was
were 12, like you mentioned.
so.
Yeah. Sitting here when you're 12, you're like, the deep implications of like the societal back and forth between the Joker and Batman and showing their face to the public.
Yeah. And I mean, Two Face is also like they roped Two Face because in the original treatments it was Two Face in the third one really being the villain, but like they roped him more heavily into this one, and he stands in between, I guess, the Batman and the Joker, where it's like half of his face is visible and recognizable and the other is not. So
Mm-hmm. Deep stuff going on in the Dark Knight universe, he says with a straight face.
yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, the Scarecrow has a weird cameo at the beginning we mentioned, just selling his fear gas on the streets, I guess. But also to kind of set up the Batman vigilanteism that he has inspired, that other people are dressing up as the Batman to fight people and getting wrecked because they don't have the money, the resources, or the training that Batman does.
Yeah, is that I would be surprised if like Batman impersonators are not a part of other Batman things, but do you know if that character the specific one that the Joker kidnaps and interrogates, is he like a recurring character in Batman?
I don't think so. I'm not a Batman expert, so I wouldn't know, but I know someone who is if we really want to know, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I just thought it might be funny if there was always this like sort of recurring character who just pretends to be Batman, but yeah.
Don't know. That makes me. That reminds me that I didn't mention that they searched far and wide for a fighting method to put in this movie for Bruce Wayne, and they eventually settled on one called Casey, I think, or Keezy, Keysi. And they settled on that. I think it's from. I want to say it's from South America, but I could be wrong. I didn't write it down. They picked that one because it was kind of raw and very brutal and kind of looks like Bruce Wayne / Batman could have come up with it himself.
It's apparently from Spain.
Spain. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
I Wikipedia'd Casey, and it directed me to the Batman Begins page.
Yeah, it did that for me too.
Yeah, it's apparently from Spain.
Huh, neat. I mean, makes sense based on the etymology of the word. I guess that's why I assumed South American, because I was thinking Portuguese.
Why? Yeah, what is the etymology? What is the etymology of that?
But not like the full etymology, just the pronunciation of the word, I guess, or the spelling, just the word
Yeah.
itself. I don't know the etymology of the word, just the word itself.
Yeah.
Etymology was the wrong word to use.
Yeah, Spanish doesn't even have a K naturally. I mean, they do now, but like they quote unquote do now because of English words and such. But yeah, yeah. I mean, interesting movie, really good. I think.
And then the question of how to follow that up. I think Christopher Nolan even said, like, he was like, I considered not even making a third one for a while because I was like, how do I follow up The Dark Knight? Will it be satisfying? And he even said, like, name one movie trilogy where the third one is good. Like,
Yeah, I think he definitely did not want to do a third one. Yeah,
I think especially after Heath Ledger died.
Yeah, and I think I didn't read too much into this. I think I just glanced at it on Wikipedia, but I think they were thinking of recasting the Joker, but I think Christopher Nolan was like, no, we shouldn't.
Yeah, he pushed against that pretty hard. The studio also then suggested, well, how about we use the Riddler as the villain, because he's kind of similar to the Joker, which, like, if you've read the comics or know anything about the Riddler, no, he's not. But they suggested that to him, and he also apparently railed pretty hardly against that because he's like, I want to do something different. Like, we can't do anything that's the same because people will just compare them, and we're never going to be as good as The Dark Knight was. So we should just do something completely different. So I'll use Bane.
Bane is kind of a meme now, and I think that's because of this movie. But like, was Bane even a well-known Batman villain before Dark Knight Rises?
I mean, he was one of the villains in Batman and Robin, which is the last Joel Schumacher movie. So he was well known enough to be one of them. Like, no, sorry, he was in Batman. Yeah, he was in Batman Forever. So no, he was in Batman and Robin because he was with Poison Ivy, and she was in Batman and Robin. God, Batman and Robin suffered from the like too many villains thing because it had Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy and Bane. Um, I mean, he was like solidly. I mean, he was as well known as the Scarecrow. Let's just put it that way. He was like that was the tier he was
Hmm.
on because the Scarecrow wasn't well known at all coming into these movies.
Yeah, I think the ones that are like Joker and Penguin are definitely more well known than like Bane and the Scarecrow.
Yeah, the Joker and the Penguin are kind of the top two. The Riddler and Mister Freeze are kind of next, and then below that it's kind of anyone's game. And Catwoman, but she's also kind of like an anti-hero more than an adversary for Batman.
And I mean, Robin is definitely the second most well known Batman character besides Batman, and he's
Yeah,
missing in action until until you get to the end of Rises and you kind of realize like, oh
you realize that you've seen them all along.
yeah, maybe the real Robin was the
The friends we made along the way.
yeah.
Dark Knight Rises was apparently inspired by Tale of Two Cities. I don't know if you read this,
Yeah.
but
All
uh,
right.
doesn't well. I think there's actually a direct quote from Tale of Two Cities. At least I thought I had heard one in the movie when I watched it, so I'm not surprised. Like I'm pretty sure. I think Gordon says like Batman flying off to kill himself was a far better thing than he's ever done, which is like basically directly what Sidney Carton says before he takes Charles Darnay's place at the guillotine. God, I can't believe I remember those details about that book because I can't remember much else about it.
Yeah. I was gonna say like yeah, I barely remember anything from that book.
That's the most famous line from that book is Sidney Carton going like, "It's a far better thing than I've ever done. It is a far better thing
No,
than I can ever do," or something like
I
that. I don't
think
know.
the
Well,
most
besides
famous.
the best of times, worst of
Yeah,
times
I
line.
was gonna say like that's probably one of the most famous literary lines.
Well, you know, Charles Dickens was really good at opening lines and then never really followed them up. You know,
Apparently,
hot
though,
take.
it was a myth that he was getting paid by the word. He just was a very verbose writer. Like,
Makes sense.
yeah, because there's always that like myth or saying that like the reason why he had all that stuff, like it was the best of times, the worst of times, whatever, is because he was getting paid by the word. But apparently, that's not true.
Don't know who to believe
He
now.
was serialized though, like that. His stories were serialized, which gives you incentive because obviously, the longer you keep these things going, the more you get paid. So that's definitely incentive to, even if you're not getting paid by the word, keep them long.
That's true. I mean, he probably was at least getting paid by the chapter.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the third one was the only one that wasn't filmed in Chicago, from what I could tell. It was filmed in Pittsburgh and Los Angeles,
Huh. I did not see
which is
that
why I
actually.
think it kind of loses some of the vibe, the Chicago Gotham vibe with the other two, which is maybe why it didn't really land for me.
Yeah, I just have it here, and I just randomly glanced at it. But filming locations including Jodh. I don't know what this is actually. Jodhpur, the second largest city in the Indian state of Rajasthan. Okay, that was one of the filming locations. So was yeah, London, Nottingham, Glasgow, Los Angeles, New York, Newark, and Pittsburgh. Which some of those were probably studios, but because it's not. I'm just looking at the intro, but. Yeah, go on. Now that interjection is done with, I guess.
No, that's. I mean, now I'm looking at the Wikipedia page and I'm seeing here also they have a much more specific like how Bane is related to the literary character of Madame Defarge.
Uh huh.
On the Tale of Two Cities analog line. So that's maybe I should reread that and draw analogs. No, I can't. I can't put myself through Tale of Two Cities again. I'm
Well,
sorry.
if we're going to be talking about like the parallels people drew, there's some weirdly like political takes, like not like specifically relating to American politics, and modern events on this movie, which is like really weird to me. This came out during like when Occupy Wall Street was like at its biggest, pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
and there were a lot of people who kind of equated it to that or thought that it was like a specifically like like specifically commenting on the American Republican Party or something like that, which is also weird to me.
I mean, the movie does foreshadow, perhaps, or bring to light the income inequality problem, but not, I think, as overtly as people might want it to be. It's mainly just through the character of Catwoman, who's like, "You're all wealthy, and I've got like jacks diddly
Yeah,
squat," and you, and she talks about how she kind of wants society to fall because then she's like, maybe people like you, to Bruce, will learn to live like people like me.
right. And even that, like, I don't know. I guess this is going beyond the scope of the movie, but I feel like people who have like super strong, or like not even people with super strong political views, but I think people like tend to see things through like specific political lenses when they're like commenting on things that, like, yeah, politics also deals with like, oh, the income gap, and that's a problem. It's one that politics deals with, and it's one that the movie deals with, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Christopher Nolan basically came out and was like, "Well, I didn't like make this movie to be political. I just made it to be a fun little like detective movie."
Yeah.
But I mean, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's, yeah, we don't need to go down that route. But like, I don't know. People just get so offended, I think. Yeah, people just get really offended over things in like a movie calling out something like the income gap. And it's like, really? Like, you're going to make this like a partisan? Okay, whatever. Like,
Oh yeah, so I wanted to talk about practical effects with and in-camera effects with relation to Dark Knight Rises because apparently, um, basically, Christopher Nolan filmed this movie, all of his movies, I think, predominantly on film, not on digital. And for this one, he filmed on IMAX film, which is it's a bigger 70 millimeter film, so you have more film fidelity, less film grain, etc., etc., etc. Bigger picture, so on and so forth. And so he invited a bunch of directors, including Edgar Wright, Michael Bay, Bryan Singer, Jon Favreau, Eli Roth, Duncan Jones, and Stephen Daldry, to show them like 6 minutes of the movie, which were shot on film, edited from film, to basically tell them like, hey, film is dying. He is a big proponent of, if we don't use it, we'll lose it. And all the directors he invited, you may notice, are not auteurs. They're not like the Wes Anderson, Quentin Tarantinos. There's an argument that's been made that Michael Bay is an auteur, but okay. They're all kind of the ones who like direct a movie because the studio's like, here's a project, and they're like, cool, paycheck. That's a studio director. And they're the ones he invited to this meeting, which is interesting because it's kind of him saying like, look, you guys have all switched to digital. That's cool, but like, don't forget that film exists, because if we stop using it or we stop considering it as an option, then it's going to go away and we'll never be able to use film again. Christopher Nolan apparently is a bit of a purist because he thinks or believes, probably correctly, that you can get better images from film, more fidelity, sharper images, and just film is better, basically. Which just, it ties into the whole like practical effects kind of thing with everything, and I respect that, I guess.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I I like that he does so much practically, as opposed to digitally, and again, that's why I think these movies visually hold up extremely well, because everything is like actually physical. Like it's like Jurassic Park. The dinosaurs were all actually real. It wasn't some CG creation that people were acting against. It was a physical object people could touch and feel.
No, wasn't it with Jurassic Park? Weren't a lot of them heavily CG, like the Stampede or whatever?
Yeah, the bigger scenes, but the smaller, the like. Well, when they first show up, there's that Triceratops on the side of the road. Like, that was an animatronic. Mm-hmm. That's really what I'm talking about. So I appreciate that, from Chris. I appreciate it.
Well, something that I didn't appreciate and that many didn't appreciate and that you
Uh-oh.
can't talk about this movie without talking about is Bane's voice.
Oh, you mean Bane?
Now, I barely looked this up, but I did find that he was inspired, Tom Hardy that is, was inspired by, I didn't write down the name, but some boxer who kind of talked like that, which was such a weird thing. And I know there was a lot of backlash against his choice here, and I guess there was sort of an effect done on it as well. But like even his intonation as well is just it's so odd.
I guess it's not weird. It's not like out of character for him to take an inspiration from a boxer, since Bane's comic book origin is basically, I mean, is completely unrecognizable from the version we see in the movie. But in the comics, Bane is a luchador.
Oh, huh.
So
Boxing champ Bartley Gorman. That's who it was. I have no idea who that is.
Bartley Gorman.
There was another Gorman in this movie, Burn Gorman, who is not great at doing an American accent.
No, no. But it was nice to see him pop up. I was like, hey!
Yeah.
The real wildcard Owen moment of the week was Burn Gorman showing up and living longer than the much more famous actor Ben Mendelsohn in the same movie.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I just know that lots of memes came out of Bane's voice, and they're all pretty funny.
Yeah, I didn't know that the big guy for you meme was from this. I did not know that. It showed up and it caught me off guard. I was like, wait, what? Because like for a split second, I was like, did they just reference that? And I was like, oh wait, it's from this movie. And it's yeah, all right. It's like, but it's out of context too, because like he's actually finishing his earlier line when he says that. Because it's like, this is gonna hurt, and then you say he says you're a big guy, huh? And he says for you. So he's finishing the previous line. So that was a joy, a pleasure to see that in this movie.
Was it?
Yeah, kind of, because there's not really much else I liked from this one. I think it's the weakest of the trilogy.
No, I think it's stronger than Batman Begins. I do think it's weaker than The Dark Knight. And I think part of the reason why Dark Knight Rises doesn't land for me is just the random, like, twist villain at the end. It kind of felt like they were trying to redo Batman Begins, but worse. Because it already happened. On its own, I guess it would have been fine, but, like, coming off the back of we had already seen it in Batman Begins, it's like, oh, okay, really?
Yeah, I guess like father, like daughter.
Yes. Also, what I disliked about the third one, though, here's the physicist in me talking again, back at it. So, Bruce designs a fusion reactor. Now, fusion is something that physicists have been 5 years away from for the past 30 years. That's a joke. We're still years away from understanding fusion power. Every nuclear reactor today is a fission reactor. A nuclear bomb is a fission reaction. Basically, the difference is fusion is you bring things together, and fission is they explode apart.
Yeah.
So in the movie, they take Bruce's fusion reactor and turn it into a nuclear bomb. And for the whole movie, I was just like, that's not how that works. That's not right. It's not right. And I know that's something pedantic that like the quote unquote regular audience member wouldn't even know or care about. But for me, I was just like, that's not how that works. It's not the whole movie. And that was really annoying.
Guess they mastered it and produced like an even better bomb.
But it seems it's like something that you could easily like Google. I Googled in preparation for this podcast to make the statement. I Googled, can you make a fusion reactor into a bomb? And the first result is from the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency. And basically it says, no, you cannot.
That's interesting because I've actually Googled. I guess I should have just asked you, but I didn't think of it. I've actually Googled multiple times: are nuclear bombs fission or fusion? And I got nothing. Like I couldn't find the answer.
Yeah, they're fission
I guess I
bombs.
should have just asked you. Yeah.
The um so I guess it's complicated because the fission reaction in the bomb will eventually induce fusion. Um, the fusion of deuterium and tritium into higher elements. The problem is you still are required to start with the fission of something like uranium or plutonium, a very heavy atomic element. But a fusion reactor would would not use uranium or plutonium. You would only use hydrogen because you would be creating energy from the fusion of hydrogen or helium, or very rarely something like lithium. So, because they mentioned in the movie, like, oh, we got the core from the reactor, which would make sense if it was a fission reactor. It'd be like the uranium core, the plutonium core, which you could very easily turn into a bomb. But there's no such core in a fusion reactor. In theory, you could try and make a bomb out of a pure fusion reactor, but it's purely theoretical. I don't know if it would be possible. But
Yeah,
hey,
weird.
again,
Maybe it has something to do with like, because Batman is like equal parts dark and light, so he's bringing things together. I don't know.
you're pushing it a little bit. You're pushing it a little bit.
That's also weird though because Christopher Nolan directed Inception, which was his next movie, I think, right after this, which they consulted
Yeah.
some science dudes or something.
And then he directed Interstellar, where his brother, who co-wrote Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, spent like a year learning theoretical physics to make sure the movie was
That's what I
accurate.
meant, not Inception. I meant Interstellar. Inception was his movie before this, which I think they also consulted some, I don't know, people on or something. Well, that one was about jumping into dreams, so I don't know. Maybe they consulted some psychologists or something.
At some point, it's literally jumping into dreams. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Yeah, isn't that what that whole movie is? Is like, it's literal, right? It's not
Yeah.
like some, it's, I've never seen it.
It's really good. I recommend it. It's very well made. Which I think every Christopher Nolan movie I've seen so far is at the very least very well made.
Yeah, I've had Dunkirk on DVD for years and I've never watched it. I just got it. Someone like gave it to me on DVD, so.
Someone was like, here, I think you'll enjoy this, and it's a Dunkirk on DVD.
Well, I got it in like a really weird way, but we don't need to get into that. But like, yeah, I never watched it.
Dunkirk was the most anxiety well, actually, no, not anymore, but at the time was the most anxiety inducing like movie going experience I had ever been through because I watched it. We have one of the largest theaters on the West Coast here in the city where we live, or nearby, and I watched it there on their biggest screen in like 70 millimeter IMAX, so it was like 4 stories tall. And the music was like, the music in that movie is incredibly repetitive because it's based on the ticking of a clock because time is ticking down. And so by the end of the movie, I was like, holy shit, I'm so anxious. Like, are they going to get out? Like, what's going to happen? No longer the most anxiety inducing experience I've had in a movie theater, but it is still damn close. Which, we didn't even talk about the music in these movies.
Yeah, created by Hans Zimmer.
And, shoot, what's his name? I have it. Yeah, James Newton Howard. Apparently, they'd always wanted to do a collaboration together, and this was finally their opportunity to collab together.
Right. Apparently, Hans Zimmer told Christopher Nolan that he would only do the soundtrack if he could collaborate on it with Howard, and he was like, okay.
He was like, all right, sure. And it is really good. I mean, the music in these movies is like, in my opinion, great.
Yeah,
Just gonna say it.
I
I think it's
thought I
great.
was just there for me. It's just any other movie score, in my opinion.
Fair enough. I just there was a very recognizable Batman theme. It wasn't the greatest movie score I've ever heard, nor the greatest superhero movie score I've ever heard, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. Overall, I thought the third one suffered from just being really overwrought, um, and having a lot going on that was not much interesting.
The third one needed another 30 minutes in like it needed another couple hours in the editing room, in my opinion. Like it was just a little too long. I think the plot was fine. If I made Dark Knight Rises, I would cut Talia entirely as a reveal. I just have Bane be the villain for the whole movie, and then just like cut 30 minutes out
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean, by the
movie.
time it was really by the time like Bruce Wayne was in the prison, I was just like, I don't care. Like I'm so checked out. Like it was.
I really liked the prison as a concept. Like I thought that was a really clever idea.
Yeah, but again, they don't like really explore it too heavily. So, oh well.
They use it as sort of a metaphor for like giving people hope and keeping them subjugated by giving them just a fragment of hope.
Yeah.
So
Well, how do they work as a trilogy? I don't know if you want to get into that, but
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
well, I would admit, I guess. They touch on a lot of the same concepts, and there's through lines from all of them. You start from Batman's origins to his ostensibly his death.
yeah, yeah. Ostensibly his death. I mean, you still think you did off recording think it's not certain that he's alive. I think it's pretty clear that he's still alive at the end of the movies.
Yeah, I think it's he's probably alive, but like I think there's room for another view there, or I think there's room to like think that he didn't survive or whatever, because we don't really know what that ending
Yeah,
scene was.
I think it was just Alfred going on a trip to take his mind off the fact that his master freaking died to the cafe he told Bruce he always went to when he went to on vacation.
And seeing him there, yeah, probably, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, on its own, it's still like a probably, but before that, we have the scene where it's revealed that he had actually installed an autopilot into the plane that he ostensibly didn't have an autopilot in and had to pilot himself a month before he crashed. And we also see him leave a note for Robin. We don't see him leave a note for Robin, but we see the note he leaves for Robin. We see the new bat signal. Like, come on. It's a plethora of
Yeah, I guess.
evidence. Plethora of evidence. Damn, when was the last time I've used plethora in casual conversation? But I do think they work really well as a trilogy. There is a thematic through line of Batman as a symbol, uh, as as a character basically that Bruce is playing, and I think it explores like Bruce Wayne's trauma and his process of getting through that pretty well. And I think it has a satisfying ending, which is all that you can really ask for. Allegedly, Joseph Gordon-Levitt came out recently and said they considered doing a Robin spin-off, but then decided not to.
Huh?
Allegedly.
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, I mean,
So
expanded
that's it.
universe stuff, I don't think we could even really get into it, unlike most things where it's like, well, there's really nothing. I mean, for this, there's literally everything. Um, yeah, I mean, there's more Batman properties than you can count on both hands and feet. So, hey,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's even the new Robert Pattinson Batman movie coming out
yeah.
next year, I guess, 2022. So that's looking like it's going to be real interesting.
Oh, I completely forgot that this is probably, I mean, we probably don't want to get too into this, but like one of the first big mass shootings of like the 2010s was related to this movie, and because the shooter opened fire during the movie.
Oh yeah, that was during Dark Knight Rises. That was the
Yeah,
Aurora
I completely forgot about
shooting.
that, but wanted to mention it.
Yeah, I mean that was a dark time. I remember that. I mean that what when that happened, we were all like, oh, "Geez, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It can't get any worse than this." I mean, all
Yeah,
those
now there's
innocent
like I
people.
think what is it? There's like one shooting every other day in the U.S. or something like that, and most of them are not even reported because it's just like such a common occurrence.
There's just so many.
Yeah,
It's just hard to keep up. Just sad.
this was probably one of the ones though that like that really proved like, hey, you can do this, and like no, I don't think most people get away with it, especially because a lot of people kill themselves after they're done with the shooting. But like,
Mm-hmm.
but it was one of the first ones where it's like you can do this if even if you can't get away with it, you know.
Right. Yeah. Somber note to end on. Somber note to end on. Because I really do have nothing else to say. So,
Yeah, yeah. Neither do I.
so if there's anyone who would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on The Dark Knight. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable and find us wherever you find your podcasts at Triple Play, a movie trilogy podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust your doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. Next time, finally, we're watching the 50 Shades trilogy.
You say
But
finally like this is a triumphant moment.
Yes, it is. I can't wait. But until then, I guess that's not something I ever wanted myself to be saying on recording. But until then, the end.